Olá, queridas irmãs, queridos irmãos, mais um programa Alimento para a Alma. Programa que está sempre desejando que você pense a respeito do seu espírito. Porque do seu estômago você sabe pensar, o seu próprio corpo exige isso de você. E quando tratamos da doutrina espírita, nós aqui sempre dizemos que não desejamos converter você ao espiritismo. Você é um bom católico, continue a ser. Você é um evangélico sincero, continue a sê-lo. Mas nós estamos explicando certas leis que valem para as pessoas de todas as crenças, mesmo que elas não acreditem nas nossas crenças. São leis que valem para o ser humano e que os espíritos amigos revelam como uma forma sábia de nos alertar de forma que nós possamos melhorar nosso amanhã. Bem, nós temos falado aqui, dentro da visão espírita, que estas leis se aplicam a todas as pessoas. Algumas pessoas não acreditam. Algumas pessoas pensam que nós estamos exagerando, que nós queremos forçar a barra, que queremos dizer que todo mundo sente espiritismo na sua veia. Não, não é verdade. Nós aqui já apresentamos a você um programa há anos atrás, cujo título é A Ciência Descobrindo a Reencarnação. Não é o espiritismo falando da reencarnação. É a ciência, contando o caso de um garotinho que quando nasceu tinha uma má formação no seu coração, ele precisou ser submetido a 6, 7 cirurgias muito pequenininho e que se lembrava, assim pequenininho, que ele havia sido pai daquela que agora era sua mãe. E esse pai havia morrido num assalto com um tiro no coração. Agora como criança ele trazia uma deformação cardíaca no novo corpo. E ele se lembrava das coisas, detalhes da sua vida no passado, quando ele era pai daquela que agora era sua mãe. Não é o espiritismo que está falando isso. São relatos de pessoas que estiveram nessas experiências e que podem contar os fatos para cientistas pesquisarem e detectarem a verdade. Fora isto, nós já falamos aqui de experiências de quase morte. Já tivemos outros programas abordando aquelas situações de vida que levam uma pessoa a um processo de desencarnação que às vezes é até atestado pelos médicos como sendo um processo irreversível. Alguns, inclusive, já lavraram atestado de óbito. E, de repente, passa-se um tempo e aquela pessoa, ela volta à vida. Volta à vida física e começa a contar coisas que ela não aprendeu no espiritismo, que ela não ouviu na igreja, que ela não foi aprender lendo livros espíritas. Ela conta fatos de extrema precisão com os cânones espirituais que os espíritos nos ensinam na doutrina espírita, mas elas nunca foram a um centro espírita, elas não são espíritas, elas são de outras religiões, ou até mesmo não têm religião nenhuma. Inclusive, nem gostam destas coisas de alma penada. Mas quando voltam, contam fatos muito peculiares e, na grande maioria, idênticos. Para vocês terem uma ideia, nos Estados Unidos, existe já uma estatística de mais de 13 milhões de pessoas que passaram por experiências de quase morte, chamadas de EQM. Inclusive há um médico neurologista que odiava essa realidade da vida espiritual e ia escrever, ele estava lutando contra isso e ele passa por uma doença e ele fica em coma, em uma experiência de quase morte. E quando ele volta, ele escreve um livro contando que ele estava errado. Ele começa a contar a verdade que ele viu do outro lado. E para você entender que nós não estamos falando de uma doutrina religiosa para castrar as pessoas, estamos falando de uma vida que faz parte das rotinas de tantas e tantas milhões de pessoas. Nós vamos trazer para você agora um vídeo de uma moça com um câncer gravíssimo espalhado por todo o corpo, com o desengano dos médicos a respeito e que passa por uma experiência de quase morte surpreendente e que a partir de então vai nos contar os detalhes que eu quero que você assista. Vamos lá? Preste atenção.
Such a thrill for me to be here, and I'm so happy to see all of you. You know, one of the biggest reasons that I'm happy to be here is because I shouldn't be alive today. I should have died on February the 2nd, 2006. That was supposed to be my last day here in this physical life. Because on that day, the doctors had told my husband and my family that I only had a few more hours to live. I was dying from end-stage lymphoma, which is a form of cancer of the lymph nodes. I had struggled with cancer for 4 years up to that point. For 4 years, this disease had devoured my body. It had traveled through my lymphatic system. It started with a lump in my neck, and then it spread throughout my lymphatic system. And by that point, by the end of 4 years, I had tumors, some of them the size of lemons, that had spread from the base of my skull, all around my neck, down into my chest, under my arms, and all the way to my abdomen. By that point also, even before I had gone into the coma, my lungs had been filled with fluid. And every time I would lie down, I would choke on my own fluid. My muscles had completely deteriorated, so I weighed about 85 pounds. I looked like just a skeleton with skin on. I had these big, gaping, open skin lesions where the toxins were oozing out of my body. I wasn't able to digest any food. I had a persistent low-grade fever. I couldn't walk because my muscles had been deteriorated, so I was constantly just lying down or being taken around in a wheelchair. I was connected to an oxygen tank all the time. I couldn't breathe without the aid of oxygen. And on that morning, on February the 2nd, 2006, I went into a coma. The doctors had said these were my final hours because now my organs had shut down. My organs were failing. So my family were told that if there was anybody that had to see me before I died, this was the time. Unbeknownst to everyone around me, though, even though it appeared that I was in a coma and my eyes were closed, I was aware of everything that was going on all around me. I was aware of my husband, who was distressed, but he was by my side holding my hand. I was aware of everything the doctors were doing. They were putting tubes in me. They were removing fluid from my lungs so that I could breathe easier. I was aware of every single thing that was happening. It felt as though I had 360-degree peripheral vision. I could see everything happening all around my body. But not just in the room where my body was, but even beyond. And it was as if I had expanded out of my body. I was aware of my physical body. I could see it lying there on that hospital bed. But I was no longer attached to that body. It felt as though I could be everywhere at the same time. It was like wherever I put my awareness, there I was. I was aware of my brother, who was in India. My body, I was in Hong Kong. This was happening to me in Hong Kong. My brother was in India and was rushing to get on a plane to come and see me. He wanted to see me before I took my last breath. And I was aware of that. I felt as though I was with him. I saw him on the plane. And then I also became aware of my father and my best friend, both of whom I had lost. Both of them had crossed over, had died. But I became aware of their presence with me, as though they were guiding me and communicating with me. One thing that I felt in this amazing, expansive state, I felt I was in like a realm of clarity, where I understood everything. I understood why I had cancer. I understood that I was much greater. In fact, all of us are much greater and more powerful than we realize when we're in our physical bodies. I also felt as if I was connected to everybody, like all the doctors that were treating me, the nurses, my husband, my mother, my brother, and everybody. I felt as though we all shared the same consciousness. I felt as though I could feel what they were feeling. I could feel the distress they were feeling. I could feel the resignation of the doctors. But at the same time, I didn't get emotionally sucked into the drama, but yet I understood what they were feeling. It's like we all share the same consciousness. It's like when we're not expressing in our physical bodies, you and I and all of us, we are all expressions of the same consciousness. That's what it felt like. I felt as though my father was trying to communicate with me that it wasn't my time, that I needed to go back into my body. At first, I didn't want to go back because I still felt as though I had a choice whether to come back or not. So at first, I absolutely did not want to go back into my body because I couldn't see a single good reason to go back into this sick and dying body. I was a burden on my family. I was suffering. There was no good reason, so I didn't want to go back. But in the next instant, it felt as if I completely understood that now that I knew what I knew, and because I understood what caused the cancer, I knew that if I chose to go back to my body would heal very, very quickly. And so, in that moment, I made the decision to go back, and I heard as though my father and my best friend said to me, now that you know the truth of who you really are, go back and live your life fearlessly. And it was in those moments that I woke up from the coma. And my family was so relieved to see me. And the doctors, they couldn't explain it. The doctors were there and they were surprised, but they were being very, very cautious because there was no way of knowing. I was still so weak. There was no way for anyone to know whether I was going to stay out of the coma or heal or go back. But I knew I was going to be fine, and I was telling my whole family, I'm going to be fine. I know I'm going to be fine. It's not my time. Within 5 days, the tumors in my body had shrunk by 70%. After 5 weeks, I was released from the hospital to go home. I was completely cancer-free. Now, what has happened is that I've had to pick up my life from that point. And as you can imagine, my life feels completely different. It changed my view of the world. That experience changed my view of our physical bodies, of my physical body, of illness, and how I perceive the world. I found it very difficult to integrate back into life again after that experience. And the best way I can think of to explain what it feels like would be to use metaphors. And a metaphor that I like to use is one of a warehouse. I'd like you to imagine, if you will, that we are in a totally darkened warehouse that's pitch black. Just imagine that right now you're in a warehouse that's completely pitch black and you can't see anything because it's so dark. You can't see anything in front of you anywhere. But imagine that in your hand you hold a little flashlight, just a little flashlight, and you switch on that flashlight. And with that flashlight, you navigate your way through the dark. And you use just the beam of that little flashlight to navigate your way in the dark. And everything that you see in the warehouse is only what you can see with the beam of that flashlight. Now imagine if the beam is shining over there, all you see is what's over there. Everything else is in darkness. You shine the beam over there, and all you see is that spot there. Everything else is in darkness except for the light of the beam. Now imagine one day, big floodlights go on, so the whole warehouse is illuminated, and you realize this warehouse is huge. It's bigger than you've ever imagined it to be. And it's lined with shelves and shelves and shelves of all kinds of different things. Every kind of thing you can imagine and things you can't even imagine all exist on these shelves, side by side by side. Some of these things are beautiful, some not so beautiful, some large, some small, some things in colors you've never ever seen before, colors you've never imagined to exist, and some things that are strange and funny looking, all exist side by side. And you've seen some of them before with your flashlight, but many of them you've never seen before because your flashlight had never shone on it. Now imagine if the lights go back off again, and you're back to one flashlight. Now, even though all you can see is what you see with the one flashlight, the beam of one flashlight, at least you now know there is so much more that exists simultaneously and alongside the things that you can see. You now know that just because you cannot see them, you cannot experience it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You now know that because you've had that experience. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like so much more exists than what we believe. So much more exists than what we have experienced. It's just beyond our flashlight. And just to help you understand that a little bit better, I'd like to try a little game, a little experiment with you. I want you to look around the room and find everything you can that is shades of red, everything from red to burgundy. Just look around and commit it to your memory. As many as possible, commit it to your memory, because I'm going to ask you to recall it. Okay, close your eyes, face the front. Now, how many things can you recall that are blue in color? Almost none. Think about it, almost. Now open your eyes and look around. See how many blue things there were that exist alongside the red, but you didn't even notice it. You didn't see it. Why? Because you weren't aware of it. The beam of that flashlight, what is that? That is your awareness. That beam is your awareness. When you flash your awareness on something, it becomes your reality. It becomes what you experience. There can be something else that's right under your nose, but if your flashlight is not shining on it, you won't even notice it. You won't even be aware of it. Think about this. Think about all the billions of dollars we are spending on cancer awareness. Think about all the cancer awareness campaigns. Imagine if we put that much money, energy, and effort into wellness awareness. What a different world we would have. Imagine if we put all our effort into peace instead of into fighting and wars. We would have a very different world if we changed our awareness. To bring it down onto a more personal level, I want to share with you the 5 biggest lessons I learned from this experience. Number 1, the most important thing that I learned, the most important thing we have here to focus our awareness on is love. That is number 1. And when I say love, it's very easy to say, or for us to say, we need to love other people. But one of the things I learned is that one of the reasons I got cancer is because I didn't love myself. That's hugely important. When we love ourselves, we value ourselves. When we value ourselves, we teach people how to treat us. When you love yourself, you find no need to control or bully other people, nor do you allow other people to control or bully you. So loving yourself is as important as loving everybody else. And the more you love yourself, the more love you have to give other people. Number 2, the next biggest lesson I learned was to live life fearlessly. Most of us are brought up on a diet of fear. We're taught to fear everything. I used to fear everything. I used to fear cancer. I used to fear eating the wrong foods. I used to fear displeasing people. I feared just about everything. I feared failing, and most of us are brought up fearing everything. And people think that fear keeps you safe. That's actually not true. Love keeps you safe. When you love yourself and when you love other people, you'll make sure that you keep yourself safe and that you keep other people out of danger's way. Love keeps you much safer than fear does. The third thing I learned that is so important is humor and laughter and joy. We're born knowing this stuff. We're born knowing that it's important to laugh because that's what kids do all the time. We're born knowing love and fearlessness, but it gets conditioned out of us as we grow up. Laughter is so important, and humor, and finding your joy in life. It's more important than any other spiritual activity that you can think of. If we had more laughter, in fact, if even our politicians learned to laugh, we'd have a very different world. And if we had more laughter, you would have less people with illness, you'd need less hospitals, and you'd need less prisons as well. The fourth thing I learned is that life is a gift. It really is. Most of us live our lives as though life is a chore, but it shouldn't be that way. And it's unfortunate that only when we lose something that we value do we really realize the true value of it. And it took me losing my life to realize the value of my life. And I don't want other people to make the same mistake, which is why I'm standing here sharing my message. Because I don't want people to realize when it's too late the value of their life. And your life is a gift. Even the challenges that come to you are a gift. When I had cancer, that was the biggest challenge I could ever have. But today when I look back on it, I feel it's the biggest gift I could have had. People think that the cancer, or even I thought the cancer was killing me. But actually, I was killing myself before I got cancer. The cancer saved my life. All your challenges are gifts. In the end, you will in the end, you will always find that your challenges are a gift. And if you're in a challenge and it doesn't feel like a gift yet, it means you haven't got to the end yet. The fifth and final thing, which is so important that I learned, is that the most important thing for you is to always be yourself. Be as you can be. Shine your light as brightly as you can. Embrace your uniqueness. Just realize who you are, get to know who you are, love yourself unconditionally, and just be yourself. And with those 5 things, I invite you to go and live your life fearlessly. Thank you very much.
Puxa vida, como você pode dizer que não existe? Como você pode dizer que é mentira? A Anita Moorjani está aí. Ela está contando. Ela era a cancerosa. Ela viu seu irmão lá na Índia, no lugar distante de onde ela estava. Ela viu o seu irmão comprando uma passagem de avião, porque ele queria beijá-la antes do último suspiro, despedir-se da irmã doente. Ela o acompanhou no avião. Ela estava lá em espírito enquanto o seu corpo estava no hospital. E a mesma coisa ela sentiu em relação ao pai, em relação aos filhos, aos irmãos, às pessoas amigas. E ela reconhece que ela se sentiu envolvida num amor gigantesco, num amor sem medidas. Ela sentia os médicos, sentia os enfermeiros, sentia aquelas pessoas que cuidavam dela. E ela conta isto tudo para nós depois que ela se reergue do corpo e está curada. Para que nós aprendamos também os mecanismos de melhorar nossas vibrações e não ficarmos reclamando das tragédias, não ficarmos entregues às situações de pessimismo, de tristezas, não ficarmos cultivando coisas ruins que são as causas originárias de tantas enfermidades. Modifiquemos o nosso padrão, unamo-nos em um sentimento de verdade, Não um sentimento enlatado, comprado em lojas, comprado em supermercado. Eu sou feliz porque comprei um modelito novo da minha roupa, ou porque eu troquei o meu carro. Eu sou feliz agora que eu construí a minha casa. Você não pode ser feliz por ter conseguido uma coisa que você vai ter que abdicar dela, que uma máquina de lavar pode estragar, que um acidente ou uma chama pode incendiar e você nunca mais ter aquilo de volta. Você pode se sentir contente por ter conquistado, mas a felicidade não pode estar aí, porque senão ela não é verdadeira. A felicidade não pode estar em um corpo sadio, porque a gente já tem o corpo sadio e o enferma, e a gente o desgasta, a gente estraga com ele. A gente precisa aprender a cultivar por dentro uma felicidade que não acaba, como ela mesma diz. Agora eu sei o que tem o armazém. Agora eu sei que ele é muito mais amplo, que tem coisas que eu não entendo, mas eu sei que apesar de eu ter só uma lanterninha, eu consigo imaginar todas as coisas que eu tenho certeza estão ali. E ela quer contar para a gente. Ela passou por isso. Ela não leu num livro, ela não frequentou um centro espírita, ela não ouviu um pastor, ela não foi à missa, ela viveu isto, como milhões de brasileiros também viveram. Ela não está inventando. Ela não está contando uma fantasia para ganhar dinheiro. Ela tem os exames. Ela tem o diagnóstico clínico. Os médicos ficaram espantados pelo fato de ela estar viva e não ter mais os tumores que ela dizia que eram do tamanho de limões espalhados pelo seu corpo. E como que ela nos ajuda? Porque se voltou, todos os espíritos nos ajudam a entender isto. Quando nós podemos voltar e ela escolheu voltar, é para que nós entendêssemos que nós podemos sentir esse amor dentro de nós mesmos, independente do lugar em que estejamos, como ela fala, para ajudar outras pessoas, a que elas também entendam isto e possam desfrutar disto. Então, querida irmã, querido irmão, mostre esse vídeo para outras pessoas. Leve este relato, não espírita, não religioso, mas verdadeiro, de um ser que estava à morte e conseguiu voltar para dizer para nós como não ficar na mesma situação que ela e como aproveitar melhor os nossos dias. Você pode ter a sua religião, mas não seja um bonequinho que senta num templo e fica ouvindo o que os outros rezam. Você precisa dar vida a isto, precisa dar sentido a essa ação no bem, independentemente de entrar ou não nos templos de pedra. A religião liga você a Deus, não ao sacerdote, ao palestrante, ao pastor. Não, liga você ao Pai. Jesus ensina isto. Então, que linda essa mulher. Que ela possa ser inspiradora de muitos outros que resgatem suas dores através do amor e então se curem. Porque isso sim é alimento para a alma. E quem se alimenta de coisas valiosas não dá espaço para doenças. Ainda que tenhamos a medicina e os santos remédios que nos ajudam, nós precisamos fabricar o nosso próprio remédio interior para que nunca mais precisemos sofrer. Eu espero que você tenha gostado. Aguardo você no nosso próximo Espírito da Letra. Ou melhor, aguardo você no nosso próximo Alimento para a Alma. Muita paz!